authors and readers, and welcome to my weekly video. I'm freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow, and this is my weekly chat about writing, editing, and the writing life. We're doing another novel deep dive, and this time it's Missing White Woman by Kelly Garrett. In case you missed our earlier videos in the series, Novel Deep Dive is where I invite a guest to break down a recent best-selling title and use that novel to talk about an aspect of writing craft. For example, our first Novel Deep Dive was an exploration of the reverse timeline story structure featured in Peter Swanson's Kill Your Darlings. And you can find that chat with author Sophia Chang on my channel. I want to start with a spoiler warning. If you have not yet read Missing White Woman and you don't want to be spoiled, pause this video and come back after you've read it, because there will be spoilers for our featured book. We are pulling this book apart. This is forensic science. It's alien autopsy level examination of the book, and that does include pot spoilers. But if spoilers don't bother you, then buckle up. This month's is a murder mystery, Missing White Woman by Kelly Garrett, and we're exploring the role of social media in modern mysteries, suspense, and thriller novels. In a world where cameras and phones are almost everywhere, how does modern technology, especially the internet and social media, impact the pacing, story structure, and character roles in modern mysteries? If that topic sounds interesting, stay tuned. I picked this one because it showed up on a list of best new mysteries. This was released in 2024. And then I saw a blurb on Amazon, and it's also on the back jacket, from Alyssa Cole. I love Alyssa Cole. She writes romance, but she also writes twisty suspense, like When No One Is Watching. And so I knew I needed to check it out, and this did not disappoint. If you haven't read it, go ahead and go back. But if you don't mind spoilers, like I don't, then buckle up. And my special guest this month is author Barbara Jean Carden, whose debut novel, Butterfly 9, is available now, and so is her second novel in this trilogy, Barracuda 9. Her passion for poker and travel is reflected in her storytelling. Audiences are invited into immersive worlds where every turn of the page brings new adventures and emotions and transformative journeys. Please check out Barbara's books on Amazon and check out her website, which is Barbara Jean Carden. It's Gene Carden, CARDIN.com. And the link is below the video. Welcome, Barbara, and let's jump in.
Hi, good morning.
So the first question I have isn't really focused on social media, but it's about the very first scene. So I wanted to touch on. Many thrillers and suspense novels start with a jump ahead in the timeline where the protagonist is in peril, and then they circle back to an earlier point in the timeline and show how they got there. But this novel starts with the protagonist in potential peril. She's afraid that she's going to be arrested, but it's the very first point in the story timeline. The opening line is, "I was going to jail." Did you think this was an effective opening to set the mood and foreshadow the story's actions?
I definitely did. I think as both readers and writers, as a writer, you're always looking for that hook or something to interest the readers. And definitely as a reader, you're trying to figure out the story of why. Why are you going to jail? Who, what's going on? So I think it's a perfect opening to try to dig in and start to solve a mystery right away.
Yes, it asks a story question, because I teach classes in openings too. And that's one of them. Is just like, is there something that they're asking that I want to keep reading to find out why? And I think we find out in the opening that the reason that Brianna is scared is she's trying to enter a code into an Airbnb that she's staying with her relatively new boyfriend, Ty. And he gave her the wrong number, so she's entering the wrong code. And some nosy neighbor is watching, and Brianna suspects that the nosy neighbor is just itching to call 911 to report her for breaking and entering. We get a good sense of the story from this in the opening when it says the pale white manicured hand gripping her cell phone like a weapon. It could be in these situations, at least for people like me. So this does such a good job of grounding the readers in Brianna's perspective. I recently stayed in Airbnb for the very first time because I'm not a world traveler. And I remember being nervous about getting the number wrong and being locked out and inconvenienced, but I was not afraid that somebody was going to call the cops on me. And that's part of my privilege of being white in America. As a small, physically not strong woman, I know what it's like to grip my keys while I'm walking across a parking lot at night. But I don't know this fear that strangers are going to call the cops on me because of the color of my skin. And this opening made that fear real to me, and it pulled me into the everyday life of our protagonist. Another thing that I noticed in this opening is that white was not the default color for the characters. And so one of the ways she did this was, rather than, describing herself physically, which can come off as an info dump, she gave this checklist of why she could be in trouble in this neighborhood. My outfit was wrong. Target. My suitcase was wrong. Amazon. Skin was wrong. Brown. Hair. Kinky. And getting bigger by the second was definitely wrong. The most expensive things on me were my sneakers. And then the nosy neighbor was described as this blonde, pale, white with expensive accessories that screamed that she fit into this posh neighborhood. I thought this was a really good way for the author to paint a descriptive picture in a first person POV without the info dumpy. I looked in the mirror and my hair was,
Yeah.
it was really well done.
Yeah, she
Okay.
does that throughout. I think she's a great writer of just doing those self-analysis, those internal reflections of why you don't feel quite enough in her surroundings. So great.
Yes,
That carries throughout the novel.
absolutely. All right, let's get on to the social media.
Sure.
How does social media function as more than just background details in Missing White Woman? In what ways does it actively drive the plot forward rather than simply reflect it? And are there moments when characters weaponize social media intentionally or not? And what are the consequences? It's a lot of questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely loaded. For That's what makes this such a wonderful modern day novel. I think if the book talk readers are into this or are really can relate to throughout how many followers does each person have, in social media, kind of to characterize how strong of a following or what their comments are impactful to, the social media world, the reader, the just everybody that's active in searching for the white woman. Also, the being investigators on their own. That's also a following. So it really puts us in modern day social media and. It is a weapon, that the strength, as I said, is kind of reflected by how many followers, how many people respond, if a video goes viral, stuff like that. Really puts us in modern day situations that maybe some people are impacted by now, but if you are into social media, it really is a good read, and you can relate to it from that point of view.
Absolutely. I think one of the primary ways that social media drive the plot was when makeup blogger Billy from A Brush with Billy injected herself into the investigation. She kind of transformed her whole platform and channel from a makeup blog to searching for the missing woman. And then she turns around her audience and kind of weaponizes them to search for Ty and then Bree. People were tracking down and harassing anybody that looked like Ty or Bree, even remotely, which is pretty much Black people going about their day. And then they were posting about it online, including other aspiring influencers who had like no recognition of possible dangers. They were just out charging around. In chapter 11, there was an online mob who had figured out that Ty had rented the Airbnb where Janelle, the missing woman, was found. And this starts this manhunt. And that whole scene reminded me of the scene from The Circle by Dave Eggers, which was a dystopian futuristic novel released in 2013. Granted, that was 12 years ago. This is contemporary. This is happening now because in the scene in The Circle from Dave Egger, there was an online manhunt for the main character's Luddite ex who only wanted to be left alone to make his ugly chandeliers out of antlers. But for some reason, they wanted to publicly locate this dude to shame him. And the public launched these drones and hunted him down, leading to his death while he was trying to escape from the pursuit, much like Princess Diana fleeing from the paparazzi. And then I thought that this hunt for Ty and then also trying to find Bree was like that. Only this is not futuristic and dystopian. This is happening today.
It
So,
definitely is, yeah. And people make up their own, they like to be those investigators, make up their own stories with the so-called clues, and put it together and theorize and sometimes even write their own story, that is not completely true. They just it's a whole following, which we've seen in other investigations live of missing people, whoever they are, in recent times. So,
yeah, and another novel that this reminded me of was The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, in which the main character was like a blogger and a citizen investigator. And so in that one, and in this story, Brianna is not investigating. She's just trying to avoid being sucked up into it. And then she does a little bit of her own sleuthing too by the end. Okay, so Garrett centers the story on viral attention and online outrage. How does the speed of social media amplify suspicion, misinformation, and pressure on the characters? And how does the spread of half truths and assumptions online escalate the conflict in the novel?
Yeah, I think that's in relation to, as we're building up, progressing here, that's more or less what we're talking about, the social media of the people that spend their time just trying to theorize on what's going on and just building the tension and all the different opinions and false assumptions that people are guilty when they're not and yeah, the mob-like mentality of going after people from a social standpoint or physically, like we talked about, which that makes it way more exciting when you sometimes those bloggers or the media folks, they go to the scene, they try to show a shot of the area just to bring their followers or their audience in. So it kind of takes us there as the reader, which I think it adds so much value and suspense to the novel. Really well done.
Yeah, yeah. It's this all reminds me of maybe 20 years ago when like we started having 24-hour news channels that then had to come up with content, and then people like Nancy Grace would just like every day harp about Natalie Holloway or whoever was the missing white woman of the time and talk about it every single day. And then it was like, who gets attention, who doesn't? And so that was not social media, that was just media. But now people are doing this on their own with their own platforms, with their own social media. I think it makes the whole story go faster with a compressed timeline rather than the detectives having days and weeks while they're interviewing people and gathering evidence. Podcasters and just randos off the street are posting their theories with their videos online with instantaneous reaction by viewers. And then eventually the police, at one point, when Brianna was finally reaching out to her mom, I was like counting back. It's just like, has it been weeks? No, she'd only been in New Jersey for a long weekend for a few days.
Right,
It
right.
it hadn't been she hadn't been in this situation for days and days and days that her mom would have like put out her own missing persons report because she was not calling her mother, which as a mom I do not recommend. She talked about needing to get back home for her shift at her retail job, but she really wasn't gone that long. This was a fast moving story and a lot was happening quickly. Regarding the spread of half truths, I did like how the internet community was able to connect the dots and figure out that Ty, her boyfriend, and Janelle, the missing woman, had known each other from college. And our main character, Bree, hadn't known Ty long enough to know all of his college friends. So she wouldn't know this, but the internet as a whole was able to piece together this information, and they were able to find out that they used to date. And when, spoiler alert, Janelle was not dead, that she actually used Ty to try and steal the Bitcoin that the real missing dead woman was trying to use to leave her husband. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
yeah, and
all of that,
Bree was figuring things out along the with the social media clues herself,
yes,
like
she was
discovery of this
using
guy.
social media
Yeah,
to come up with an alternative narrative that it wasn't that Ty did it. It was he was a victim. And the police were happy to just, hey, it was him. And then he committed suicide. And she's like, he would not drown himself. He hated water. He didn't swim. This would
yeah,
be the worst. That would not be how he would do it. And by the way, he wasn't a killer. So Ty was a victim, not a killer. And if Breed hadn't had that, all that stuff about the social media, she wouldn't have been able to piece together some of the stuff that had happened.
right.
Do you watch true crime shows? And what role does the public's appetite for true crime and missing person narratives play into shaping how the events unfold in this story?
It just seems that you can't resist true crime shows. It personally, I tend to think, oh, I'm not into that, but if one starts and you just those Datelines or the 48 hour, you just can't stop watching it because they plot them so well that what happens next, who was involved, and they really make a great story and do keep the reader or the watcher just hooked. And I found it really great that in the book, the police in this case, in modern day society, they're saying, get out of the way, you self-crime solvers, you don't play a role in this. It's almost like those folks are a joke. But in reality, yeah, they may muddy the water and put false information out there, but you'd like to think that it does help solve the crime and the stories when people unfold information.
Yeah, I was just watching His and Hers on Netflix, which is
Uh-huh.
another, crime mystery. And there was an investigative reporter and a sheriff. It's really good. But it just reminds me when the police were trying to clear the area and have everybody back up. It just reminded me of like every Scooby Doo episode. You pesky kids, just get
Yeah.
out of the way. And it's just like, yes, all the citizen investigators and online folks are the pesky kids who are finding out a lot of information, but they're not always doing it in the best ways. I like true crime too. I watched recently Candy with Jessica Biel as the 1980s mom who killed another suburban mom with an axe. Have you seen that one? And then
Yeah.
she just went about her day picking up her kids from Vacation Bible School and shopping at Target. And so that was wild. My husband will not watch these with me, so I watch these by
Oh,
myself. And then back in the day, I used to watch 48 Hours and other news shows detailing actual crimes. But I do think that the prevalence of true crime in our modern culture has desensitized people so that they can sometimes view people as characters more than humans. And people like myself will trot out tropes like it's always the husband or it's always the boyfriend. And Brianna even saw herself doing that, thinking that when she didn't even know if Janelle had a significant other. And so tropes are generally good in fiction, but can be harmful when applied to real people. And then I also, in chapter 2, Brianna was talking to a Black neighbor, Mrs. Morgaine, who was also talking about the missing white woman, Janelle. And Brianna realized this was somebody that Mrs. Morgaine knew from her neighborhood because Janelle was local and everybody was talking about her. And then Brie wonders, it's always the boyfriend, and she started like thinking of it like a Netflix docuseries. But then she realized that was insensitive because Janelle is a real person and not just a
mhm.
character. How did the novel highlight the growing online interest in the case? You talked about it a little bit about the followers and the likes, and how does online engagement like likes and shares and outrage influence which characters are believed and doubted and dismissed?
Yeah, yeah, like we said for sure earlier, the number of followers and the number of positive comments that shows support and strength of the social media, and then the just the technology of getting what was it that Bree needed access to Ty's phone that really led to some of the clues that she just she had to understand to just to believe in his innocence, to really investigate that. So it all kind of comes together with the social media platforms, the technology of the cell phones, and how that all crosses over for her own investigation and support of the social media people. Um, I don't know if when they all come together as far as physically, uh, I don't know if that's so realistic. It might be, that was probably where I'm like, now wait, they're friends now. They were enemies on social media. Bree was accused of falsely accused, obviously, too, of being involved or all sorts of things that she had a reach to prove her own innocence of having nothing to do with the situation. So, so
Yeah, I
yeah,
can see
it
why
layers
Billy
in,
would
which
have
is great.
wanted to have Bree on because Billy's looking for any attention is good attention,
Sure.
but but would Bree have actually reached out to Billy?
Yeah,
And was
I
it a
know
desperation
you.
move?
Well,
Yeah.
when they go to see when the gathering, when her and her friend go, and
Vigil. Yeah.
yeah, you would think they'd want to stay far away from a situation like that, like they can't really hide. So that might have been, it might have been possible, but maybe I don't know. I had a hard time right there, maybe thinking, would you put yourself in that situation if people are bashing you? But it did bring it together, so they could communicate in person, I guess, and away
It
from.
was good conflict. It was, I will say that, just like,
Yes.
ooh, let's put together some people who've got some history. I think, okay, so from a story structure thing, I believe so. Most of the novel is in first person POV with Brianna, but then some of these chapters are descriptions of TikTok videos and other social media, and especially the A Brush with Billy ones. And I originally read this in audiobook. Like I read most of my stuff in audiobook first. And I hadn't really noticed that until I got a paper copy and I was studying up for this one. And I'm just like, oh, these do pop a lot more when
Yeah.
when you can see it's a new chapter and it's this thing. Cause I just kind of thought that Brianna was listening to it, but it was a good way to highlight to the readers, this is all going on. We've got Bree, we're following her through her story, but then all of this social media is going on. And it's not necessarily clear from here whether Brianna knows what all that is, because it doesn't actually show her listening to it. And so it's like, that's out there. Yeah. And so there was also this troll going by Rach with a bunch of H's that engaged in Billy's channel with a bunch of posts that blame Janelle for her own disappearance and scolding women to be smarter and not putting themselves in risky situations. And she had more than 10,000 likes and 30 and 300 responses. And then Bree went and downvoted all of her comments. And I'm like, why would you engage? You know, why are you feeding the trolls? But,
Yeah.
but I do think that that's also realistic, that people do react like that.
Oh, for sure. You get obsessive with something, you read every little detail.
So, do you think that technology, cell phones, social media platforms, and information that's available online help the protagonist uncover the truth, or does it complicate the search? We talked about this a little bit more
Yeah,
about, yeah,
for 100% it helped. I mean, if she wouldn't have had Ty's phone, if Bree wouldn't have had Ty's phone to read some of the clues of some of the messages exchanged, kind of trying to put it together herself, that that one bit would have left us empty or not had the information for her to just completely continue to believe in him, when she had her self-doubts with the, and then the conflict, as you said, the social media um, responses and conversations, they weren't in line with the reality of what happened. So, both of those things played in the progress of the story.
yeah. I mean, Billy had a narrative and she was running with her narrative. And the fact that it wasn't the truth didn't stop it from being super popular and having people supporting it. I did think one of the most interesting parts was, Bree wakes up, she walks down the stairs in this Airbnb and she finds this dead body. And then she runs outside to get some help and she leaves behind her phone. And then the cops don't let her have her phone back. And then she has no way to reach Ty because she
Right.
doesn't know his phone number. And then I started thinking about it. Yeah, I know my husband's phone number, but we've been married for 20 years. I don't know my own teenage son's phone numbers. I'm a terrible mom. And so,
No, it
but
happens.
who does when you can just
It-
program it
right.
in? And then I was really amused when Brie went to Ty's office and wants to leave him a message and needs to ask for a pen and paper. And the office receptionist was chuckling. Um, and she's trying to log into all of her accounts, but there's two-factor authentication. She can't log into Apple or
Yeah,
Microsoft without her phone. And I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. And so
right.
from that perspective, all the technology was unhelpful because a mystery taking place 20 years ago, she would have known her boyfriend's phone number or a way to find it pretty easily. And she would have been able to, log into something and not have to use a phone and get a code and log in
I
like that.
I
And so
also, yeah, I think they also tie it to, she ties it to her identity in a way too, even though that's not technology.
yeah,
She doesn't have her ID, so she
yeah,
can't do a lot of things that you would normally do, check into a hotel, anything. It's what do you say? Regular, what we're familiar with of having that technology, but it all kind of co goes together. You have no proof of who you are without your phone or your ID or anything else. So that was a definite struggle when she's just trying to get away from everything. So,
Oh, I know.
yeah.
And my younger coworkers at my day job always laugh at me because I pay for lunch in cash. And I'm just like, "Hey, I don't want the man knowing how often I go to this fast food joint." And they laugh and they scoff and I'm just like, "But I've always got cash with me because if I'm out, driving around, I want to be able to
Yeah.
get gas in my car even if my phone dies and
Well, not to
or
get
there's
too
some
far
kind
off the
of
subject. Yeah, I live in a poker player world where cash is prevalent and we, meals and even groceries, a lot of things, it's a cash world still, and
I
so
think
it
you and
it
I are
is.
unique in that one because a lot of people I know don't carry any cash, don't carry any. And I'm just
Well,
like, and I'm
the
guessing Bree doesn't really either.
The opposite, yeah, all the incentives to use credit cards and stuff, you get points, you get, they try to, yeah,
Yeah.
have you, and yeah, luckily, she has a friend to help her
Yes.
out. Um, yeah,
Is she a friend?
yeah,
Yes,
right.
that's another fun.
Yeah.
I loved that exploration of that relationship with her former classmate and who then came in to be her lawyer and helped her because she did help her get a hotel room and stuff. But
Yeah. And that in
that was a
itself, I think as I was reading it, trying to figure out what's the angst or, if they're such good friends that somebody's going to swoop in and help you like this, what's their history that she's so that she struggles to trust her and what happens. So that's kind of like a B-level story going on in this primary story of the mystery, which I think is really
Oh, it
great.
was great. It was great. I was like, ooh, tell me
Yeah.
more. Why does she not like her? Why has she not talked to her in so long? And Kelly Garrett, the author, did a great job of dropping subtle little nuggets that is just like, well, is she here to help? She seems helpful, but Bree doesn't really trust her. And so there's got to be something. So let's just keep digging. Let's keep reading.
Right.
Now, the social media was all over this book. Were there any parts of the social media presence that seem forced or unrealistic to you, a modern reader who does use social media?
Um, yeah, I think it just seemed that we mentioned it earlier, how easily they came together. I think I have some social media book talk friends that maybe I've never seen. I don't know where they're from. What is the reality of that they would be so close to just pop up and run into each other and then build a personal relationship that they're inviting. I think Bree invited her, Billy over to her into her place and that, just you're like, what? That just seems too convenient and too easy, I think. What do you think?
Well, the part that I thought was just a bridge too far was Brianna had talked about her social media, and then she said with her TikTok, she said that her channel was mostly black skincare videos, and she's following The Rock. And I'm like, well,
Hmm.
I want to start following The Rock now. But then it said that a video about Janelle Beckett had shown up in her For You feed. And I'm like, why would that be for
Oh,
you?
great. Yeah.
Because that doesn't seem like the algorithm would find that unless it's geography based. I'm going to admit I'm not on TikTok.
Maybe
I
age
should be
based too, or yeah, interest. There might be a cross there, but yeah, that I actually didn't think about that one, but that's true.
because
Yeah.
I will say I'm on social media primarily as an editor and a writer. I do not get videos and links and news stories about missing people. I actively avoid and have them hide anything that's politics, which is harder and harder living in Minnesota right now.
Yeah.
But these things don't just show up to me. I get a lot of writing and then stuff like
But
that. And so I was like,
yeah.
but what I thought could have happened that would have made it more realistic is Bree's mom had sent her a link. If she had clicked on that link, then all of a sudden they know. They know because they're
Yes, they
spying on your
do.
phone. Because one time I was in a Facebook group with some friends, some writer friends, and one of them had posted a link about Sasquatch. And then I had Sasquatch everywhere in my
Oh,
feed.
for
It was
sure.
amazing. because I
And they're
clicked one
listening
link.
too.
Yes, they're listening too. Now
Yeah.
you're going to have some Sasquatch too. And everybody who's reading this. But it's just, to me, it's just like that would have shown up for her based. It would have been more organic to me if she'd actually clicked a link first to get it. Yeah. But that was just my one. It's just like, really, you're following, skincare folks in The Rock, and but maybe okay. How does Garrett explore the idea that social media encourages performance, especially around grief, concern, and activism?
Um, yeah, I don't know if I have too much of an opinion on that. I don't know if you want to take that one. I
Sure.
think, yeah, sure. I have some ideas of just reflecting. People just pour out their true feelings and everything with no restrictions. But some of us are maybe less. At least I am, and that maybe that's how I have a harder time relating to that, pouring out your grief and concern and telling every which emotion you're feeling. But yes, some are can more easily just put it out there, which I probably being of a different age, a little bit past that, don't, kind of hold some things tight to the glove. What do you think there? Yeah.
Yeah. The part that I thought really explored it the best was when Billy, the makeup influencer, was holding the vigil. And so she's tears and outrage for the camera, but then we get a good behind the scenes glimpse when her handlers are trying to get Bree there, and she's all business. This is not emotion, this is not grief, this is an opportunity. And I'm just like, whoa, she took off that grief like a mask, and it was
Ah,
easy to remove because it was just there to serve her purpose. And I was just like, I see you, a brush with Billy. And so,
yeah.
but yeah. All right, we'll keep going here. How does reading a suspense novel steeped in social media change your experience as a reader? Does it feel more immediate, more stressful, more familiar?
I think it it was the first, probably one of the first books I've read that really is so modern and that you can really relate to if you're on social media a lot. And I thought it made the read fast and not necessarily stressful, but definitely more immediate because you're almost experiencing every little thing as if you would be looking at something on social media, like an immediate feedback, an immediate progress. And it was familiar just because we're involved in, I think a lot of us are just so involved in social media. So I thought it was great for a suspense novel, and I would expect to see more of that type, in the near
Yeah,
future.
I think so. When I was reading this, I was comparing it to something like In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware, it's pretty recent, but it's set in a remote area without reliable Wi-Fi or cell service. And so they made that. So it's like trying to take the tech out of the solution, and they're out for a hen party in the woods, and then the murders start. And so it's just like, with me, stories like that, and there's quite a few of them that are set in like isolated areas. The wedding party is like that too. And it's just
Yeah,
like,
loved it.
it's just like for some reason we've stepped back in time and now we don't have social media, and we can't use those resources to help us solve who's murdering. But this is the other side of the coin. It is faster paced, and I thought it was a bit more stressful. When the police are in charge rather than social media, there's at least a presumption that they are going to have some evidence for basing arrests, and that their decisions have some evidence and a review of relevant data. But when the internet as a mob is tossing out accusations and igniting manhunts for people that they deem to be suspects, there's no presumption that that's based on evidence or true or unbiased. And so mob rule can be a little scary too. So I thought
Oh,
that
for
was
sure.
an interesting aspect to it.
Yeah, not to get too far off track here, but yeah, the Butterfly Nine book that I wrote, my debut novel, there's a missing person. It's a big piece of the novel, but it was written or the scene was before 2000, so late 1990s. So in
Yes.
that missing person case, there's a private investigator involved, and it's some poker players talking on a blog that wasn't just becoming popular. So little clues of inputs of people, but there was, and there's cell phones, but it was a different type of tracking and
They weren't
mystery because,
smartphones. They you
yeah,
could text and you could call.
yeah, that's right.
Oh, kids these days, they don't remember.
I know how hard it was to find a person.
Yes. Yeah, no, this is there are other ones like this one, but that's why I picked this one is because it was so immersed in it. And I'm just like, oh, this will be a fun topic. Now, this leads to the last question. Do you think that this story could exist without the modern technology? Why or not?
I think just like we were talking, I think you could set up the same scene. I'm trying to think, with old tactics and investigators. Sure, you could have the private investigators or the cops looking. I think the story would have been quite different, and maybe unfinished even, and I think I could see it told in a different way, but it really the value of this story was all the social media and relatability of modern day. I think that's really what makes the story. And then the the stories that were also folded into this the major plot. Like it really kind of came together so nicely with the modern technology. I think it could have been done, but the story there a lot of things would have had to change, I think.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be the same story without the modern tech.
Mm.
The modern tech and also the lens on the racial disparities in the world, with strangers harassing Black men and women in at the subway and in grocery stores, and tech mobs doxing hotel rooms. This is all kind of woven into the fabric of the story. So I really don't think it'd be the same story without this contemporary tech dystopia in progress setting that we're living in. All right. Okay. Do you have anything else that you would like to add about this book?
Um, the ending, how we just kind of wrapped it up. Maybe we should touch on that. I don't know. I really I felt like I wanted a little more, or that not again. We're probably giving away. So,
Give it away. We told them it was spoilers. Give it
yeah,
away.
the whole scene where the real missing white girl is on the other side of the train, and Bree holds up the Bitcoin, and then the little bit, yeah, about the mysterious donations, like would she really have just given away the money? Like I almost have chills. Yeah, like just all she's been through. I just don't know. I don't know. I felt that the ending could have twisted a different way, or gone on a little bit longer. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it ended a little abruptly, but they did wrap up the plot points. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I think that that Bree found the key, the encryption key for the Bitcoin. So she ended up with the money that the actual dead woman, who wasn't Janelle, had was trying to use to escape her controlling husband. And so Bree had that resource. And then she's going the other way as the allegedly missing woman, Janelle, who is actually the murderer, is getting caught because, when you're running around and people think you're dead and all these people around you are dead, well, they're putting the pieces
Right.
together. Uh, Billy, the blogger, was outed as involved in this and
Yeah.
loses her whole platform. And then we have an alternative social media star on the rise
Discussion.
that's
Yeah.
that's flipped the script and is looking for Janelle and is looking for. Are they looking for Billy too at that point? I don't remember. I'm trying
I
to.
think they are. Yeah, Billy went
Yeah, I think they
missing.
are. They're looking for him. Where could they be? But what's Bree gonna do on the run with this money? And yeah,
So, right, and maybe that leads to a possible second book. I don't know, but I would have loved to get into Bree's head of her, even going back to the opening line of I'm going to jail. So why wouldn't she have thought, I've got all this money that might be illegal. Is this another crime? It could be a whole different storyline of what to do, or maybe it's boring, maybe it's perfect left for us as the reader to imagine, her life or where she goes after that. But
I know. I mean, because I'm just like, does she return home? Because her relationship with her mom was not that great. Her
right,
mom, who didn't believe her when she said that she hadn't had the drugs when she was in college and that she was arrested for, and she really hadn't, but her mom hadn't believed her and had made her take a plea deal that ended up getting her kicked out of her whole career path and everything. And it's just like, well, where do you go when you don't really have an identity? Because it is getting harder and harder for people to, start over
right.
with
Unless you
when
become a
social
social
media
media.
follows you everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and her friendship with her best friend now damaged again, or it ended. It's just there's I guess it's great to leave some things open to the imagination of the reader, but
I think you're right. It does set it up for a possible second book.
correct,
And
yeah,
is with this threat that she did take this money, she didn't turn it over to the police. She had additional evidence that she could have given the police, but they weren't really opening and kind to her either. So
right. And as much as she struggled, why wouldn't she keep the money? And she talks about how she's got lower level, her bags, her clothes, everything it's threaded throughout of how she doesn't feel quite up with, society. So, why wouldn't she treat herself to some things if she's
well,
got
she was
it?
talking about her suitcases, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
Cheap suitcases from Amazon. I would love those.
right.
It's just like, oh man, I'm in the
Yeah,
Midwest. We don't care
I
about these
definitely think we could run with a whole story of maybe she didn't give it all to charity. Maybe
maybe
she,
she invested it first and then this was just part of it.
that's right.
Yes. So
We could write another book.
yeah, no. Kelly Garrett could write another book.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the next Mrs. Parrish and then the last Mrs. Parrish too, because did you
Uh,
read those? And it was, that might be a future novel deep dive where it's which is an interesting take on perspective. So if you haven't read those two by Liv Constantine, which is actually a pair of sisters who write together, that's another fun one where it's just like you think you got like a whole story in one, and then you read the next book and you're like, oh, okay. So all right. Thank you so much for joining me, Barbara. Please check out Barbara's books, Butterfly 9 and Barracuda 9. They're on Amazon, and check out her website, barbarajeancarden.com. And thank you for joining us. To all my wonderful viewers, if you're a writer or an avid reader that would like to join me for a novel deep dive, join my newsletter, because that's where I'm lining up guests for my future novel deep dives and also taking suggestions for novels to tackle with specific writing elements that we're going to explore. You can sign up for my newsletter on my website, which is mirandadarrow.com, or email me. My email is on my YouTube channel profile, and it's also on my website. If you like the discussion, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Subscribe to my channel, and then you can join me next week, because every week I have videos on writing, editing, and the writing life. And we'll have another novel deep dive next month. And so until then, I'm freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow, wishing you happy writing.
Bye, it was fun.